He also got lots of very interesting letters, including from Perpich, the governor, and Mondale, who at that time was state senator, and a great one from Jerry Ford, who was vice president at the time. I have to read you this paragraph. So this was a letter to my father from Gerald Ford. I must confess that as a pipe smoker, thank you, George, you're aiding my lungs here is what you're doing. I must confess that as a pipe smoker of more years than I care to count, I find it extremely difficult to put my pipe aside for any lengthy period. So I can appreciate the problems of longtime smokers experience in trying to stop. Your D-Day campaign may provide a little extra incentive for a no-smoking pledge. So there was lots of letters and publicity. Dear Abby, Charles Schultz in Minnesota wrote Peanuts, and there was all kinds of stories throughout the nation. This one in Minnesota, Jerry, the next one. This one in Tucson, Arizona, and we can go. And then there were then all kinds of anniversaries. So USA Today, Dear Abby, Star Tribune again. This would have been on the 10-year anniversary of D-Day. It all culminated, really culminated in the fact that people quit smoking. And for every one of those people that said this was a publicity stunt, which just added to my father's ego, there was 10, if not 25 people that stopped him on the street, no matter where he went. If they found out that he was the originator of the Great American Smokeout, stopped him on the street and thanked him. This happened many times in his life, where they thanked him because he was the one that got them to quit smoking. They would tell their stories, as some of you do here, about how your life improved, and health, and cost, and so forth. Next, Jerry. Oh, okay. So when I started to say that, where did this all culminate? Well, it all led to my dad getting the highest award, highest citizen award for from the American Cancer Society for his efforts. Most of the Cancer Society awards and their national go to researchers and people that have found cures for different types of cancer. So this was a pretty illustrious company in the Waldorf Astoria banquet room for my father and mother, when he was given this award. It's the first time in his life he had worn a tux, because he had never had a need in small town Minnesota. He was married in his brother's suit in '46. So this was the pinnacle for him personally. And then I just pointed this out, that I talked about the fact that the world now has, at least in 1989, had a no tobacco day. Okay. Whoops. So, where does it go on? Yes, it does. It still goes on. 10 days ago, almost 2 weeks ago, the Great American Smokeout was again observed across this country. I just go online every year and plug in his name and the smokeout and come up with stories across this country on various observances or campaigns on the local level. In this case, we lost that one, but it really doesn't matter. In this case, on the East Coast. So we're coming up to the 40th anniversary of the smokeout, and somewhat like the military countdown originally, the Monticello Times of today is doing a series of stories that broke this week, and this one, this is guess you'd say, a lead story of 40 years, Great American Smokeout hits its hallmark. So it'll be back in the news in big time. I'd be remiss if I didn't say, at least mention my mother, because when my father went on his, he was full tilt. He was 100% consumed by things. At one point it was golf, another point it was foreign cars, and then this one came, and he never got rid of it. So my mother was tireless in hearing about this and traveled, well, a lot through Minnesota, but also around the country to things, sounding board, and she has plenty of stories to tell in a very modest way. So just to finish the story with an obituary, my dad died in 2005, so about 8 years ago. My mom's still living in Minnesota. She gets some of the interviews now, although she would prefer not to. Let me close by this was written about the event and how unusual it was for a weekly newspaper editor. You know, for those of you that grew up in small towns and read weekly newspapers, you know there's a certain amount of ridicule or people dismiss them as never having an impact. We print the news that everyone already knew, like people read it anyway just to see if you got it right. I mean, I've heard all of these. I've heard all of these in my life, and a lot of people joke that those weeklies are filled with local news on who visited who. You know what I'm talking about if you grew up in a small town. When I've talked about this to college students many times, I talk about the fact that no matter the size of your newspaper, the reach of your audience, or how many readers you have, you could still have impact. And a fellow newspaper publisher in South Dakota said it best, and I'll read this. Is from Bob Carroll-Levitt's South Dakota. I quote, "It is doubtful that any other weekly editor in the country ever had as much of an impact on so many people across the nation and in other parts of the world as Lynn has had. What he did, without realizing at the time, was to become the originator of the annual No Smoking Day, which affects millions of Americans each year, and in the process, he's won the title of public enemy #1 of the tobacco industry. And there's no telling how many lives he might have saved along the way." Thank you. Harvey.
Yes, I didn't realize that I have your father to thank that I quit smoking in the second second smokeout in California.
He would, I wish he was alive to hear that story, but this was not a setup, everybody, but that is exactly the type of testimony he heard. So I can tell you when you quit then, if the second California would have been about 77.
Yeah.
Jerry.
So was he a smoker up to D-Day?
No, he quit. He quit in '54 at the first Surgeon General's warning. So he had quit 20. He had been a non-smoker for 20 years. Don.
Your dad was a great hero, obviously. I wish he had been able to get a hold of my dad. He started in World War I, and by the time I knew him as a kid, he was up to 4 packs a day. And I never had a man-to-man conversation with him because he died of lung cancer when I was 19 years old. And it's a terrible thing, the smoking business.
Thank you. Whoa.
Yeah, my mother smoked for 68 years. She could never quit. But the nice thing was her 5 kids hated it so much they never smoked.
Remind me how many reformed smokers we have here.
Yeah, if you don't mind, how many reformed or quit smokers? About. Luke.
What was it like for you to follow in his footsteps, and how has he influenced you personally in your career?
I often tell people I will never have as big, well, I'm retired now, so for those who don't know, I followed my dad and mom, Nancy and I did, as owners of the paper, and I was actually there, born into weekly newspapers and was there 34 years. Well, it's pretty clear that I'm in the, tens of thousands of us who've toiled in the weekly newspaper business that never had anything like that and never will. So I never felt, though, a shadow of blue, but it's a fair question. What did I learn from that? Well, I think I learned how much influence, if people were willing to step out, even in a weekly, I hate to say that, even in a weekly, I'll just say a weekly newspaper can have if you properly use your influence. And so I learned that about that, the role of the editorial, the role of opinion, and also the courage to take a stand. A lot of those people that signed up to not smoke were very good friends of his, probably detested him during that month period and hated him on the day of D-Day. And it would have been, I think it took a fair amount of courage to do it. So. Okay, I got to get to the doctor here. Ted.
One of the doctors. In 1974, I was 48 years old, at the peak of my career as an academic, as a urological surgeon, when we actually got into knowing how important smoking had to do with etiology of bladder cancer and all sorts of other cancers. And I remember, I was there, Edward R. Murrow, he died of cancer. Ad hominem argument, Mickey Mann, all these people did these things. And I even remember the time when you saw things in the newspaper, more doctors smoked Camels than any other cigarettes. So all these people promoted that, to the addiction of this terrible stuff, carcinogens. And now I walk down the street and I see young people smoking, people in high school, people. Counted how many people, young people, are smoking. Old people, under the bridges, they're all smoking, and so it's sort of a disappointing and frustrating thing to do. But I think you have to continue to carry the message, not to be judgmental, but to show people that what can happen. This is going on now, but it's a losing battle.
I don't think my father was judgmental because he had been addicted to nicotine himself, so he knew it. But he never quit trying to influence people. He had a debilitating stroke at age 78. He lived 7 more years in a nursing home. But any nursing home employee that he knew smoked, he was still trying to influence them. When the smokeout came around every year, he would try to get those to quit. Tara.
Did you personally have any pushback from the tobacco companies? Like, did they kind of go after him? Like, what was that response from the tobacco companies?
That would be a whole other 20 minutes, but he loved to have give and take with the Tobacco Institute and other people. So whenever he'd write something like The Tyranny of Smoking, he'd send it to certain tobacco people, hoping to get responses that he could print in letters to the editor, which would, they would show their arguments about we live in America, this is free enterprise, we're freedom, you can't tell me what to do. So there was a lot of that, and as Carol Evans said, my dad was probably public enemy #1 to the tobacco industry, and they probably dismissed him for a long time because he's just a weekly publisher with about 3,000, 4,000 readers. But they knew who he was. But, I mean, they carry on with all their arguments. And so, one more. George.
Well, we get personal. Your dad had fascinations with many things.